Let me go ahead and just start us off here with a story. Is that all right? I don't know if you've seen my preaching before, but I like stories. So a few days ago, I accidentally misquoted scripture, which admittedly is probably not how you want to hear your preacher start off the sermon. But it's okay. It's okay. So I was studying or wrapping up a study of 1 Corinthians, going through all 16 chapters of it. And the way that I do it, I kind of have a notebook beside me, and I want to just kind of take my time through the text. So if anything stands out, I'll kind of write it down. If there's a verse I really want to remember, I'll just write out the verse in my journal just so I have it to go back to. It's kind of like a preaching commentary for future use. But I was just going through and I was studying the text, and I was wrapping it up at chapter 16, where Paul is closing his letter to Corinth. And 1 Corinthians chapter 16, verse 13 really stood out to me. And so I wanted to write it. But I did it a little bit wrong. And so I want to read it to you, and then I want to tell you what exactly I wrote. 1 Corinthians chapter 16, verse 13 says this: "Be on your guard. Stand firm in the faith. Be courageous. Be strong." Be on your guard. Stand firm in the faith. Be courageous. Be strong. And so I read that and I was like, that's pretty good. And it's not a verse that immediately pops out compared to the rest of the verses that we read in the Bible. But as I was writing it, I accidentally wrote it wrong. And instead of writing, "Be on your guard, stand firm in the faith, be courageous, be strong," I accidentally wrote, "Be on your guard, stand on faith." Stand on faith. And those words kind of jumped out at me. And I thought about it. Stand on faith. I was like, that sounds pretty cool. Then I looked back and I realized that's not actually what the text said. But I think it means the same thing. To stand firm in the faith and to stand on faith. What exactly does that mean? I think something along these lines. I think if we were to truly stand on faith, or to stand firm in the faith, then we would walk and live as if the words in this book were true. Is that fair? Does that make sense? If we were to truly stand on faith, if we were to stand firm in our faith, then we would walk as if the words in this book were true. As if the words in this book was truth. Right? Is that fair? All right. So as we dive in today, I have two questions for reflection that I want us to think about. Today we're going to be looking at a story featuring a man you might have heard of. His name was Jesus. And I want to ask two questions about this man in the Bible. And I want you to just reflect on them, what this would mean for you. First question: how would your life change if Jesus could really do what he says he can do? How would your life change if Jesus could really do what he says he can do? Second question: how would your life change if Jesus really was who he said he was? How would your life change if Jesus really was who he said he was? So let me start off with a story. So this past weekend, there was a colossal event in Buffalo. Now, I don't know if anybody's familiar, but the Buffalo Bills, look, I won't stay here too long. I won't even mention how the Bills beat the Steelers. I won't even mention it, okay? I'm not going to talk about how they beat the Steelers and are moving on to the next round of the playoffs. I'm not going to mention it in case there's any tension in the room already. But one thing was very interesting about this game that was not normal. Now, this game was delayed for over a day, which is it's unusual in the NFL, in the National Football League, to delay a game for more than 24 hours. You might ask, okay, so then why'd they have to delay it? Because of one thing that Buffalo knows and loves: snow. Actually, my mom just sent me a post this morning. She said this was in the news, and it was like snowfall totals for the latest storm. And in Lancaster, the place that I grew up, it was 60 inches of snow for the latest storm. That's a lot of snow. So, we get a lot of snow where I grew up in Buffalo, right? And so, so we're pretty used to it. And so a few years ago, I had a funny story with the snow. A few years ago, when I was a little bit younger, my brother's girlfriend drove over to our house to hang out. And she came over. I forget exactly what happened. It was probably like earlier in the morning. She came over and it was snowing. And occasionally, because we were one of the side roads, the plows would come through and clear the roads of the snow, right? I don't know if y'all are familiar with that in South Carolina or North Carolina. But the plows would come through and they clear off the roads until a few hours later, there's like 2 to 3 inches of snow on the roads. And there's a lot more everywhere else. And, the main roads are completely clear. Our side road has like 2 to 3 inches. But there was a bit of a problem. Because my brother's girlfriend parked her car in the road. Which means that when the plows went through, they had to kind of go around her car and then keep going, right? And so on the road was only about 2 to 3 inches. But right around her car, there was like a hill of snow, right? And so she's like, all right, guys, I'll see you later. She's getting ready to leave. So she hops in her car. She puts it in drive, right? Turns it on, puts it in drive. She steps on the gas, and the wheels go, but the car's not moving. And she's like, that's weird. And then she steps on the gas, and the tires go, but the car's still not going to move. It is like stuck. It ain't going nowhere, right? And so defeated, she kind of turns off the car. She comes back inside, and she's like, guys, there's a bit of a problem. And we're like, what's going on? What's wrong? She's like, my car's stuck. And I think it's something like in the male brain where like you hear like big object move, right? And like something just awakens. Like I don't know what it is, but but the 3 teenage boys in the house, we all got up and we were like, I was born for this moment, right? We all got up. We were like, I've been waiting for this my entire life. And so all 3 of us, we head out there in like shorts and t-shirts, and we're like, I'm so ready for this. And so I don't know if anyone here has ever like pushed a big object, or like, I don't know, for me growing up, we used to make snowballs like as massive as we could, like bigger than ourselves. And eventually the bigger they got, they were like way too heavy to push. And so what you'd have to do is you would kind of have to push it, and then it would kind of come back. And then you would use that momentum to push it again, and then let it come back. And you have more momentum to push it again. And if it was really big, you'd have to do that a few times until you probably know what I'm talking about. Yeah. She knows what I'm talking about. You'd have to push it a few times until eventually you get enough to get over the hill. And then now that it's rolling, you want to push to like keep it going, because you know if it stops, it's going to be even harder to move the next time. And so it's the same thing with a car, actually. You might be surprised. So we all hop out there, and my brother's girlfriend, she hops in the car, she puts it in neutral, and the 3 boys, we all get behind this car, and we're like, whew, like none of us played football, but like we felt like we were padded up, and we're like, we're ready here, right? And so we go, we're like on 3, 1, 2, 3, and we push as hard as we could. We're like, push. Man, I had some tea to hope my voice wouldn't crack today, but anyway. So we all get behind, we go push, and we start to move it, and all of a sudden, like, it's not going. We're like, get back, as the car, like, comes back crashing down on us, right? Everybody good? All right, we're good. Let's try it again. And so we all go, we push, and then it comes back. We're like, all right, we gotta use that momentum. And so we push, and then we let it come back. It's kind of like a dance, you push, you let it come back. And then we're like, all right, this is the one. It's a weird kind of dance, admittedly. But we're like, all right, this is the one. And so we push, and we're like, keep going. And then it gets over the hill, and so we keep on pushing with the momentum. And then my brother's girlfriend, she sticks the car in drive, puts her foot on the gas, and she's gone, right? And she's out of there. Makes it to the main roads. Those are completely plowed out and clear. She made it home safe. And, man, I'm tired after that. I really put it in there, that pushing the air. But I tell that story because it's the story of a car that was stuck. And my brother's girlfriend, her car, no matter what she did, she was not going to be able to get it out of the spot that it was in, right? Because it was stuck. And if you were ever on the side of the road and you parked and something like that happened to you, you'd have a pretty difficult time getting the car out when it's stuck. And I wonder, has anyone in this room ever been stuck? And I'm not talking about your car in a bunch of snow or in South Carolina. Ain't no snow around here. But maybe it's something else, like a relationship that you feel stuck in. Or maybe it's like this season of life where you kind of want to move on, but you kind of feel like you're stuck. Maybe it's a group of people that you want to detach to, but you feel like you're stuck. Maybe it's just like this mess that you're in right now, and you just feel like you can't get out of it, so you feel like you're stuck. Maybe it's a pattern of habits. Maybe it's an addiction. Has anyone in this room ever been stuck before? And I ask that because today we're going to be looking at a story of a man who was stuck until another man named Jesus came into his life. We're going to be looking at John chapter 5. Now, this is probably a story that you've heard before, but I want to give it a bit of a different spin. We're going to be looking at John chapter 5, starting right there in verse 1. John chapter 5, verse 1 says this. Sometime later, Jesus went up to Jerusalem for one of the Jewish festivals. Now there's in Jerusalem near the sheep gate a pool, which in Aramaic is called Bethesda, and which is surrounded by 5 covered colonnades. Here a great number of disabled people used to lie, the blind, the lame, and the paralyzed. One who had been there was an invalid for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and learned that he had been in this condition for a long time, he asked him, "Do you want to get well?" "Sir," the invalid replied, "I have no one to help me into the pool when the water is stirred. While I'm trying to get in, someone else goes down ahead of me." Then Jesus said to him, let's pause there for a quick second. Then Jesus said, "Do you want to be well?" "Sir, I have no one to help me." Then Jesus said. What does he say? He turns to the man who had not been able to walk for 38 years. Then Jesus said, "Get up. Pick up your mat and walk." And at once the man was cured. He picked up his mat and walked. Are y'all ready for the sermon title? I actually switched it last minute. When I came into this building, it was a different sermon title, and I decided to switch it. Sermon title for today, Stand on Faith. That little writing mistake in 1 Corinthians sounded pretty cool. So the sermon title is Stand on Faith. Let's go ahead and let's jump into this text because there's a lot to unpack here. There's a lot to unpack. Starting in verse 1, we can already just absolutely dive into this. So starting at verse 1, John chapter 5, verse 1, it says this. Sometime later, Jesus went up to Jerusalem for one of the Jewish festivals. Pause there. Why did Jesus go up to Jerusalem? For one of the Jewish festivals, right? And now it doesn't specify exactly which one. A lot of people believe it was probably the Passover. That's kind of general consensus. Probably the Passover. And with the Passover, it's probably a lot of eating. You got to do a lot of reading of Scripture. Like there's certain things to be done to celebrate a festival. And so it says that Jesus went to Jerusalem for the festival, right? It's exactly what it says, right? Yes? Why was he at the pool? This question kind of stuck out to me because it says at the very beginning, okay, now sometime later, Jesus went up to Jerusalem for one of the Jewish festivals. But then the next few verses all of a sudden start talking about a pool. And I just want to pause here for a second because think about it. It says that Jesus may have come for a festival, but his heart was after a person. Do we see that in the text? It says that Jesus had a reason for when he came to Jerusalem. When Jesus went to Jerusalem, he had a plan. But his heart was after a person. And I just think that's a pretty beautiful thing that we see here in the text. But then there's another thing here. See, what kind of person does he come and talk to? He talks to the kind of person who can't move. And Jesus says, that's okay. I'll come to you. And so I don't know if you've ever been stuck before, where you feel like you're in a situation where you can't move. Maybe that's spiritually or emotionally, or it's your situation, whatever it is. I don't know if you felt like you've been stuck before. But Jesus says, okay, I'll come to you. It's the story of Jesus, of the good shepherd, leaving the 99 to chase the one lost sheep. Jesus is in the business of chasing after lost, broken, stuck people. Verse 1, sometime later, Jesus went up to Jerusalem for one of the Jewish festivals. But his heart was after a person. Let's go ahead and keep reading in verse 2. Now there is in Jerusalem, near the sheep gate, a pool, which in Aramaic is called Bethesda, and which is surrounded by 5 covered colonnades. Here a great number of disabled people used to lie, the blind, the lame, and the paralyzed. Now I'm going to pause here for a second, because there's something really interesting in this text. Now, who here usually uses the NIV? Is anybody like Anybody like ESV more so? Yeah? NLT? Okay, so we got some of it. I was like, those are probably the 3 most popular, except for the King James. Yeah, where are King James people at? All right, you Baptists. All right, so this passage looks a little different. Congrats, you're honorary now. This passage looks a little bit different in the King James version than it does in some of the other more popular versions. Not more popular, in some of the other popular versions, like the ESV or the NIV or the NLT. If you read it and you look very carefully, what we have is verse 1, verse 2, verse 3, verse 5. Yeah, it goes like that. And you might notice like something appears to be missing, right? Where's verse 4? The King James has it right there in the text, but in some of the other Bibles, it's actually a footnote. And so it says 4 in brackets, and then it puts it down at the bottom. Why? Because it says this was only included in some of the original manuscripts. So they're not sure if maybe it was added in later to give some context or what exactly it is, but there's a mystery verse, if you will, a hidden verse. I know. What? You want to know what it is? Okay. Let's take a look at verse 3.5 and verse 4. It says this, and this is only included in some of the manuscripts and the KJV. Let me start at verse 3. Here a great number of disabled people used to lie, the blind, the lame, and the paralyzed. Here's the hidden part. And they waited for the moving of the waters. For from time to time an angel of the Lord would come down and stir up the waters. The first one into the pool after each such disturbance would be cured of whatever disease they had. That's kind of interesting to me, right? It's interesting. It's not in all the manuscripts, but it kind of gives some context as to why there was a bunch of lame and paralyzed and blind people that would just hang out around this pool. Because they believed that from time to time the water would be stirred, and if you could make it into the water first, then you'd be cured. They're going to take away my discipleship credit if I say this. And that's kind of funny to me. Just pause. Picture this, right? Pretty much, it's a foot race. The signal is when the water is stirred, and it's a foot race between someone who can't see the water being stirred and someone who can see it but can't move to get to the water after it's been stirred. This is a pretty chaotic scene, if I'm being honest, right? Just think about this. I'm not a betting man, but if I was, I'd put my money on the deaf people all the time, right? I feel like you have a bit of an advantage there. But it's kind of a weird thing, right? And so they hang around this pool, and the next one won't be a discipleship credit. I'll tell you that right now. It's not. You said what? Sorry, we'll cut that out of the video. But think about it, right? Like Pretty wild spot, I'm sure. Like, it got to be pretty wild, right? And so they would wait for the water to be stirred, and then they'd all be like, this is my time. And then they go shoo, and dive into the water because they believed the first one in there could be cured. They really believed it. So much so that this man had been an invalid for 38 years. And he was hanging around this pool, hoping that maybe, hoping that maybe he could get what he really wanted. Let's go ahead and keep on reading in verse 5. One who was there had been an invalid for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and learned that he had been in this condition for a long time, he asked him, "Do you want to get well?" "Sir," the invalid replied, "I have no one to help me into the pool when the water is stirred. While I'm trying to get in, someone else goes down ahead of me." Pause there. This kind of goes back to what I was talking about earlier, where I don't know if you've ever been in a season where you felt like you were kind of stuck, and whatever that might look like for you. But if you ever have, then you probably know exactly what this man is talking about. Because the first thing he says is, "Sir, I have no one to help me, so I'm stuck here." Well, actually, look at that first word. Verse 7, "Sir," the invalid replied. This man is probably lying down on the ground. And this random man just entered the pool, never seen him before. And he starts talking to him and he says, "Sir." Why does he say "sir"? It's some kind of formality, right? We could all agree on that. See, he said "sir" because he didn't know it was Jesus. He didn't know the name, right? He said "sir" because he didn't know who he was talking to. Y'all get it? Verse 7, "Sir," the invalid replied. And we could just pause there because he'd never seen this man before. He didn't know anything about this man. And so he said, "Sir," because he didn't know who he was talking to. I could preach on this for a little while, I can't lie. Because it might be so easy for us to look back at the story and say, obviously, it's obvious who he was talking to. He was talking to Jesus, right? But he didn't know it at the time. And so I want to ask you this. Do you know who you're talking to? When we pray, when we have the ability to pray and communicate with God, do we know who we're talking to? Jesus. One who, obviously, it's so obvious, we can look back at the story because we have the whole context. We can see, okay, obviously, he can heal this man. He can give this man what he so desperately wanted, right? It was Jesus that he was talking to, but do we know who we talk to when we pray? Not only is it someone of infinite power and ability, but also someone of infinite love. How do I know that? Why was Jesus there? Because he loved the man. And he sought him out. But before we move on past that, I want to stick on his response. "Sir," the invalid replied, "I have no one to help me into the pool when the water is stirred." Pause there. He says, "Sir, I have no one to help me." Has anyone ever been in a season where you feel alone? Maybe. Maybe it's just me. But there have been times in my life where if you would have asked me if I needed help, if you would have asked me if I was okay, then yeah, I'd probably look at you and say, hey, I just got no one to help me. I don't know if you've ever been alone, but I get it. See, if I was driving and I got my own car stuck and the snow started to pile up, if I was alone, I'm not sure what I would do. There's not much to do in that situation. Because why? Because I didn't have anyone to help me, or I wouldn't have anyone to help me, right? And so sometimes when you come to a season in your life where you feel stuck, like you're stuck in some kind of mess, like you're stuck in some kind of situation, like you're stuck in some kind of addiction, stuck in some kind of habits. Sometimes you get to these places and you feel like, I have no one to help me, so I can't get out of here. Sir, the invalid replied, I have no one to help me. I have no one who cares for me. I have no one reaching out to me. I have no one. Sir, I can't put it down. I can't get out of where I am. I can't move. I feel stuck. I feel too far from God. I can't stop eating it. I can't stop watching it. And the worst part is I have no one to help me. Out of the mess, out of the addiction. Has anyone in this room ever been stuck before? Because if so, you get it. But before we move on, there was one more thing in his response that really stuck out to me. Sir, the invalid replied, I have no one to help me when the water is being stirred. Someone always jumps in front of me when I'm trying to get in, right? He never says yes. Jared, what are you talking about? Is this some kind of dating show? No. Look at the context, because Jesus asks him, what does he ask him? He says, do you want to get well? And the man actually never says yes to Jesus. And I find that interesting because look at what he says. He doesn't say yes. Instead, what does he do? He starts to tell Jesus about everything that he's been trying to do to get well and how it has not been working. Does that make sense? He never tells Jesus, yes, I want to be well. Instead, he just starts opening up and saying, well, sir, I've been trying. I've been sitting around this pool for so long, but I have no one to help me get in. Every time I try, it doesn't work. And every time I try to get better, every time I try to find healing, every time I try to get out of this situation, I'm still stuck. Why? Because I have no one to help me. I've been desperately trying every option that there is available to find help. But I still have no one, but I'm still in the same situation, but I'm still stuck where I am. I've tried everything to finally be free from this. But nothing works. And here's why I like this story. Because then a man named Jesus shows up. And wherever you are in your life, that's always a good thing. When Jesus shows up. And after he tells Jesus, who he didn't even know was Jesus, after he tells him, listen, I've been trying everything that I can to be better. I've been trying everything I can to find healing, but nothing I do works. Jesus looks at him and says, okay. That's okay. I know you've been trying. I know you've been hurt. I know you've been burned. I know you've been stuck here for a long time. And I know that you've been trying everything that you can to find healing. But what you really need, Jesus says, I am. Verse 8. Then Jesus said. I don't know if y'all got it the first time. But the man said, I've been trying everything that I can to be well. Then Jesus said. It's a little bit differently now, right? Now that we put ourselves in the shoes of desperation that this man walks in. That was really insensitive. Now that we put ourselves in the shoes of desperation of this man who's been trying everything that he can to be better, then Jesus said, what does he say? Get up. What does he say? Get up. Pick up your mat and walk. At once. Man, we could pause there again. Then Jesus said, at once. Y'all see the connection there? Then Jesus said, at once. What happens then? At once, the man was cured. He picked up his mat and walked. You know what I love is Jesus told him to get up, which in itself is a miracle of healing. But what does he say after that? He said, pick up your mat. Why? Why did he say to pick up your mat? Because, don't miss this, don't miss this, don't miss this. Why did Jesus tell the man to pick up his mat? Because the kind of freedom and deliverance that Jesus can give is the kind where you don't go back to where you were stuck. The kind of freedom, deliverance, and healing that only Jesus can give is the kind where you don't go back to where you had been stuck before. And so he told the man, get up, which he had never been able to do. And trust me, he's been trying for a long time. But he had never been able to do it. But he said, get up, now you can. Why? Because Jesus was there. Pick up your mat. Why? Because you're not going back to where you were. I know it was familiar to you. I know you've been there a long time. Say goodbye. Third one. Walk. See, that last one, I think, was a calling. A call to show everyone in his life the power and deliverance that Jesus has and can give. You might be thinking like, Jared, what does that mean? What do you mean by that? Well, think about this. See, it's not like it's some kind of call to go and preach a sermon or to lead worship or to lead a student outreach or to lead a prayer walk or to lead a Bible study for your team. It's not that kind of a call. But it's a call to very powerful and effective ministry. Jared, what are you talking about? What kind of ministry? Well, think about it. Because this man has probably been seen by a lot of people, known as one of the people who would sit around the pool, as one of the people who couldn't walk. Probably what he did was ask and beg for money and food so that he could be provided for. So people probably knew of this man as someone who was stuck, as someone who couldn't walk. But now all of a sudden, the same man that has been an invalid for 38 years, all of a sudden now he can walk. And everyone who sees the deliverance that he is now walking in has a testimony of what the power of Christ can do for them. And so whatever situation you are stuck in, the life-changing deliverance that Jesus can give will be a powerful testimony when you get up, pick up your mat, and walk. Jared, it's not that simple, man. You know, like, Jared, I've been to church plenty of times. I've prayed plenty of times. And here I am, still struggling. Here I am, still stuck. How can you say that Jesus can give a deliverance where I can pick up my mat and say, I'm not going back? How can you say that? I'm a testimony of what God can do. I heard the phrase once, crooked sticks draw straight lines, but not on their own. God can take a broken man like me, someone who was chased after by Jesus, even when I felt like I was too far from God or stuck in a way that I couldn't be delivered from. But he did. And what if that was true for your life today? If Jesus told this man to get up and walk, how would your life be different if Jesus could really do what he says he can do? I don't know if you are stuck or what situation you might be stuck in. But what I do know is that we have a God who can heal and forgive. And those have been my 2 words recently. And I can stand up here and say, by the grace of God, I'm healed and forgiven. Not by what I can do, but with the infinite power of God, who with his infinite love chased me down. Died on a cross to pay the penalty that I was deserving. So let me close with this. How would your life change if Jesus could really do what he says he can do? If you believed that Jesus could really do what he says he can do. And secondly, how would your life change if Jesus really was who he said? How would your life change if you believed that Jesus really was who he said he was? Because he said to get up. And the same God who healed him back then is the same God who can give deliverance and freedom today. Get up. Pick up your mat. In Jesus' name, pick up your mat and walk. That's all I got. I'll close in prayer.